So, ladies and gentlemen, what do I have for you today? Well, today we're going to attempt to install the OEM backup camera on my wife's 2014 Ram pickup truck. Back then they didn't come standard with them like they do after the feds changed the laws in 16, I think. Now everything is mandated to have one. And I've never really needed it. I've backed into a few things, but nothing terrible. But what I have noticed on my big Dodge that I tow with now, the 17, is it is really nice when you have to back up to a trailer. And you've got that camera there. You can line it right up in one shot by yourself. You don't need help. You don't need to get out, in and out, in and out, in and out. And especially now with this new ZF 8-speed where they redid the transmission programming where you can't back up or move forward with the bloody door open if you have your seatbelt off going slow. Stupid. But anyway, I digress. So what do we have? This is the factory kit. I got it from Amazon. If this works, you'll see a link to my Amazon affiliate where this will be linked in the description of this video. So what do we have? We have the new latch with the camera on it. New wiring harness from the camera to the one that goes down through the tailgate down to the bed, which then connects to the body harness, which goes from the inside of underneath the bed all the way up to the front. Connects to a power wire underneath one of the main fuse boxes, which is going to require some soldering, which is what all this little stuff is for. That ought to be entertaining. Then this sneaks through the firewall. This gets connected into the body control module. This connector gets assembled, which then connects to this connector, which then goes over to the back of the radio and connects to the video source, also in one of the Deutsch connectors, I guess, if these are actually considered Deutsch connectors and not Molex. I don't know. But this ought to be entertaining. Mechanically, getting the tailgate set up is going to be simple. That's a couple of bolts, nuts, screws, things like that. We'll run through that. That'll be pretty easy. Running this up to the front, that's probably not going to be that hard. When we get into the steps where we've got to partially strip a pink wire coming out of one of the fuse panels and then solder this to it without breaking that other wire, now we're getting into some higher level stuff that's kind of on the outside of my comfort level, but we're going to try it. And the rest of this stuff, not too hard. The worst parts is generally trying to unpin some of these connectors, and there is a little bit of that we're going to have to do, and I'm going to show you how I believe they're supposed to come apart without breaking them. I think I may only have to do one of those. There's a couple others that talk about it in the instructions, which did come in English, French, and Spanish, so that's kind of nice. There's a couple other connectors that could possibly have to be de-pinned before I can put new pins in them, but given that this truck is fairly old and was never optioned with this or anything else, I don't know that it's necessarily going to need that to be done. So that's what we're going to do today. First thing we're going to do is move this junk outside and start taking the tailgate apart. Alright, well, supposedly we don't need too many tools other than metric sockets, a Phillips screwdriver, trim stick, wire cutters, RTV sealant, and the crimping tool, which of course I don't have, but we'll make do. One of the first things you need to do in ye olde instructions, well, it says take the negative battery cable off. We'll do that in a bit. But we've got to get to the inside of the tailgate. Underneath this bedline, or tailgate protector, which for this truck I put a WeatherTech on it, so that's what this is. Yours may differ. Is a panel along the whole top of here where all the wires and connections and things live for the new, well, and existing latch. So that's the first thing we're going to do. I'm not going to show some of these steps, which are going to be pretty obvious. The tailgate protector on this one comes off. You've got some screws here and a little bit of Velcro up front. and then that'll pop off, and then there's some more screws here, 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 and here, and then that panel comes up. So that's where we're going to start. That's what we're going to do, and then we're going to start the action inside the tailgate. Okay, once you pull all of the screws off, then this panel should just move out of the way. And it does. And I don't know why these grommets stuck on that one. I guess just because they felt like it. All the rest of them came off, so don't lose those if they do stick. So now we're getting into the nitty-gritty here of what we've got going on. You've got some of the harnesses you're going to have to change. See the similar bends. And this harness that's going to go in there on the new latch. Apparently the mechanism isn't going to move. Now, that's interesting. So that's a good thing, I guess. All that mechanism is going to kind of stay where it's supposed to be. So we are going to set this aside and get set up and see what we can do. Okay, so the first thing it says to do is mark these control rods and then disconnect them. Well, I've got this on video, so I'm not going to mark them, but I guess it's because you want the driver's side on the bottom and the passenger side on the top. These connectors are pretty common in this kind of thing. You usually just have to spin that out of the way, and then it disconnects. Same thing over here, spin it out of the way, and it pops off. And now these shouldn't come out. You should just leave them, because obviously that's going to go back in. So the next step is going to be getting down in here, and there's a couple of small, look to be maybe 8mm nuts we're going to have to take off, which is going to let the whole thing completely fall apart. So I'm going to go get a little wrench and see what we can do. So what you've got is this old one is in here underneath from the back like this. Got these two studs here, and they are little 8mm nuts that are on them. And because of my big fat hands, not the easiest things in the world to get a hold of. Found it. And the next step is to remove this and there it goes. This. So now we have the old one out and the new one about ready to start the reassembly. There really isn't much to this. All that does, when you pull up on the handle, this lever pushes on this lever, pulls those two rods that we disconnected, and unhooks the sides. So that's it. So now we're going to figure out what the next step is. So the next step is to transfer the lock cylinder over to the new unit, which is also 8mm. Interesting. The screws are self-tappers, so there are no threads in these holes to start, which is, I guess, to be expected. It's just a casting. And you want to be careful not to over tighten them, I would guess. Snap. lock cylinder is transferred, and we got our new unit with the camera. So we're basically done with this. So it's at this point that the actual instructions skip a couple of steps. We have a new connector for here, and an entirely new harness that starts here and goes down to in here, comes out over there. You can see it actually has the same clips on it. And so this is underneath this. So if we don't go in there right now and kind of get that out of the way and get everything plugged in, then it's going to get difficult to make this work. So I'm going to go get my trim sticks with a Christmas tree remover and see if we can get this out of here without bending anything. It goes, but that's not what I wanted to do. That's okay. Done. So that part of the harness is disconnected. Let's see if it's... And it is loose all the way down to the back side over there. So that's good. The next one is going to be... see if we can pry this out of here. Nope. There it goes. Got that one disconnected. Got another one here. This one's interesting because this wire has been pinched in the gap for the tailgate for a long time, and I don't know that that's supposed to be like that, but all these connectors are now loose. So now we need to pop this one. I'm sure this one's big. There's a little tab you have to push to be able to pull this one out, and then there, it's free. So now what we're going to have to do is disconnect the body harness from this truck from this, so then we can get it out. As you can see, that piece is here on the new harness. Can't quite tell how to get that. So we're going to take a better look at it and see what we can do. And once you pull the whole harness out, it is a fairly standard double lock connector. So you got to move the red one up, and then you should be able to pinch it and pull it off, just like that. And now your old harness is done. Now here comes part of the fun part of this kit. So these two wires are related to the power tailgate lock. They run this solenoid. And those are not in the new body harness on this kit. So you actually end up having to pull these two pins out of this connector and repin them into one of the other connectors, so that when you plug the body harness with all of the camera stuff in it into this plug, you transfer over these wires from the car right now that actually run the power tailgate lock. So I think I know how to get those out without damaging them, but we're going to try in a little bit. The next step is to basically put the tailgate back together, drop the new wiring harness in, get everything plugged in, hooked up. Notice it has both of those connectors that go into the tailgate. And then we're going to get this all the way over to here, attach the new wire to that, put these two things back in, and then plug everything back in. So we're going to put the harness in first. The harness came out from the bottom, so I'm going to try to put it back in from the bottom as well. So this is the path that the harness has to take. It's not too bad to pull it in there. It takes a little bit of fiddling, but then you end up with, over here, this connector goes right there. Now I have not hooked up the outside connectors yet, which will finish holding this in place, because I want to make sure I have plenty of room when I have to unpin this connector and do everything else. So I'm not going to try to put all this in yet. I'm just going to let it flop for now. So now we're going to reassemble the new camera latch and the lock mechanism. There she goes. As you can see, the way that goes in there, it kind of covers up. It doesn't cover up that connector too bad, so still not too bad. And make sure that your rods are not blocked by anything, because they have to go back on. So once you get that, then and these go back in the same way they came out. Okay, that works. The lock mechanism is lined up. Now we need to hook in the wires. And they come in from this side a little bit. A little bit easier to get this one if that rod is disconnected. It's also rather hard to see the orientation that this needs to be in. Oh, let me show you something there. You can see the little green lines? Those lined up, and that's the orientation it's supposed to be in. I didn't realize they were set up like that, so that's kind of cool. Just a quick little note on the camera plug. And now the other one. Reseat this. And the easy part is done. Now we have a camera. We still have our lock. Everything is where it's supposed to be, held down as it's intended to be. So what we can do now, put this cover back on and start working on the next steps, which is where the wiring part comes in. So that's going to be fun. The next part of this is where we have to, since I have the tailgate lock and these two wires in this connector, just like that, where we need to depin this connector and reinstall those wires in here correctly. But there are, or are 4 empty spots, as you can see. Those 2 little white plugs, and I've already pulled out 2 of the other white plugs. But I've never really done automotive electronics, so telling me that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 Am I looking at it this way or this way? What I figured is, I guess that the 2 pins on this connector should be in the same place as on this connector. Put them in the same orientation. Yeah, there we go. So the green one goes near the blue, and then that other one goes next to it, and those other 2 plugs stay in like I have them. So what I believe we have to do to get these apart is, I think this white retainer has to get popped out the front, and then there should be little, very small pry pieces that we can pop to disconnect the 2 wires, and then they should just slide back in the same orientation into this new one. So I'm gonna go get a couple of very small screwdrivers and see what we can do here. I'm not sure how terribly well this is gonna show up, but that white piece has to come out. And then you've got 2 of the connectors in there. And right now I gotta go get my glasses because I can't see what I'm doing. And I think what we've got is, if you go down the top of these connectors, yep, there's a little tiny clip that you can pry up, and then after you get that clip unhooked, you can see I've got one where it'll move. And then they will come out. Whew. I don't know if that's even focusing, but down in there you can see those little tiny black clips. And if you pull those out, you pop those up, then those connectors can come out. And so those 2 went in like that. And now, if I am good, I can take this connector and just put them back in. Now I may need to pop this thing out of here so I can see what I'm doing. At the distance. Okay, now there's 1, there's 2, they're in. And now we should be able to just put this hopefully right back where it came from. And that connector is repinned. So of course, it would have made a hell of a lot more sense if I had done that from the bottom. So now I need to run that wire, which I don't think is going to be a big deal because it's a pretty big hole down there, but I need to run all of that wire down through this hole. But anyway, so that's how you repin one of these connectors. It's kind of a faff, but it's required for this, and you really don't want to cut and splice and do all that other stuff because, I mean, there's no other wires in this new connector. So that is the beginning of the fun part. Now what I'm going to do is cut my tie wrap, run all this cable down through here, probably drop the spare tire to open up a little room, and then we're going to start running this cable up to the front. Okay, so Once you unscrew that, you can then take the piece that came out of the trunk reconnect it, set that double lock, and refit this piece like so. Make sure your clips are where they need to be. And the rear is done. And you've got all this crap that you now need to run under the car following the existing wires with tie wraps every 3 millimeters or whatever they say. Sent like 60 of them. All the way up to the front where the real fun begins. So I'm going to put my tailgate cover back on, get this closed up, and then we'll see what we need to do for that.